All right. So today we are talking about MySQL queries. So SQL is different from MySQL, right? So MySQL is the database management system. It's sort of the interface between us and our data. We use the SQL language to access our data. So SQL, and it's pronounced, it's either SQL or SQL. I say SQL, but people get mad. Some people get mad when you call it SQL. SQL is, I think, the correct official term, but you can say it either way. So SQL stands for Structured Query Language. And like I said before, it's older than me. It came out in 1974. I was born in 1975. So this is an old language. There are a lot of different software systems and libraries that will write SQL for us, just because it's kind of a, it's not the most pleasant thing in the world to write. It's kind of fun. It's easier than like say Python or something like that, but there's a lot of tools out there that help us with it. So SQL statements, also known as queries. So when we write a statement, we'll get into statements in a second, but we're basically asking questions or using this language, SQL or SQL, to pull data or pull information from our database. So instead of scrolling through a spreadsheet looking for what we need, we can just write these queries or write these statements in this language, and it'll retrieve the data for us. Okay, so the things we can do with SQL, and these are the keywords that the SQL statements start with. This isn't all of them, but these are the ones we're going to deal with mostly. There's select, there's insert, there's update, and there's delete. Okay, so those are the four that we're primarily going to be dealing with in this course. So databases in SQL, we use, again, SQL or SQL is the language, MySQL is the database. Okay, any questions about that so far? Cool. All right, so connecting to MySQL, this is not that crucial to understand, but I want to make sure that it's in the interest of full disclosure. When tomorrow we're going to be hooking this up to Python and Flask, right? So we're going to be doing full stack web development starting tomorrow. We're, incorporating the database, incorporating our web server. So on our computer, on your computers, on my computer, on all of our computers right now, there is a server running. Okay, it just sort of always runs in the background, and that's the SQL server. So when we make a web application, we're going to be basically accessing it via localhost. We also access our web server on localhost. Okay, so this may be a little confusing. We have two servers running on the same device. Both of them are running on localhost, but the way they're able to run simultaneously on the same server is they're listening on different ports. Okay, so we separate out traffic based on the port numbers. So SQL is blanking 3306, I believe. And when we run our Flask applications, it's running on port 8000. So when we say localhost 8000 when we were running our servers, that's basically how they're able to operate on the same localhost. Any questions about that? All right. So, an import. So we talked yesterday about ERD diagrams, right? So the ERD diagrams basically write the SQL for us. So there's two ways to get a database into our SQL workbench. So the one way is to copy and paste a SQL file, and we'll do that today. We can basically, in our Visual Studio Code, we can write our SQL files in an editor that's a little bit more friendly, and we have the keyboard shortcuts and all that. And then we can just paste it into MySQL Workbench. I find MySQL Workbench to be a little hard to code in because the keyboard shortcuts are weird and you have to actually copy and paste. There may be keyboard shortcuts, I just don't know what they are. But you can write your code in Visual Studio Code and then paste it into Workbench and run it. And I'll do a demo on that in a few minutes. And then the other way to get a database is to create our ERD diagrams and forward engineer them. And we'll do the forward engineering today, and we'll get some practice with that. Any questions so far?
Yeah, just real quick. So
yeah, cool. I want to make sure. I want to wait to make sure you guys are still there.
I guess I was just going to ask, the diagrams that we were making, that just gave us tables to fill in later, right, for our Flask?
Yeah.
And that was the whole point of that. Okay.
Yeah. So the ERD diagrams will generate the database that will eventually hold our data. And today we're going to write actual SQL statements that will add data to those databases. So that's kind of what the SQL statements are for. That we could write SQL statements that create a database, but the ERD diagrams do that for us. But we still have to write the SQL to add items to our tables, delete items from our tables, update them, and manipulate them however we want. Does that make sense? Like the
yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so CRUD. So the CRUD is basically, these are all the operations that we're going to operate on our data. Does anybody know what this stands for?
Create, read, update, delete.
Create, read, update, delete. So CRUD, we create our data. So if we have a new user, we're going to create a user in our database. If we want to look at our data, if we want to say how many users do we have, or how many dojos do we have, how many widgets, how many products, that's a read, right? So every time we go to Amazon and say, search for the cool new computer, the new Mac that came out, I think it's coming out 2 days. We want to search for that, that's going to be a read, right? So we make a request, it goes to their databases, and they're retrieving the data, and we're going to read what the data that's on their database. Update is basically when you have a form, right? When we have a form and we put our form data into a session, now we're going to be able to actually update our database using forms. Okay, so any changes we make to the data that exists on the server, that's going to be an update. And then a delete is just obviously just deleting whatever we want to delete. Okay. Questions about that CRUD? All right. So for create, read, update, delete, the corresponding SQL statements. So what SQL statement, and I know we haven't talked about it yet, but if you've done the reading, what SQL statement do you think corresponds to create?
Insert.
Insert, very good. What about read?
Select.
Select, right. So select is probably the one we're going to be using the most because we do a lot of reading, right? The purpose of having a database is to share the data. So we'll be writing a lot of select statements. And then update, delete are pretty easy because it's the same exact word. Cool. All right, so let's start with select. So who can tell me what this statement does?
Select all from table names.
Exactly. So the select keyword basically says select or retrieve or grab, whatever. The star is pretty much a universal symbol meaning everything. From, and then we indicate the table name. So if we wanted to get all of our users, we would say select everything from users. If we wanted to get all of our posts, we would select everything from posts. Okay. What does this one say? What will this one do?
Selects all the names from a specific column.
Exactly.
Or just the names?
Yeah, so I'm using generic like column name. Column name would be something like first name or last name or post, right, or content. So yeah,
the
column
name
name.
column.
Yeah, so basically instead of grabbing everything, right, I'm saying I want to get all the first names from users. Right, so whoops, sorry about that. So if basically column name would be the individual columns in our table, and then the table name would be the table in which they are, or which they exist. So if I wanted to get all the first names from users, I would say select first name from users.
This is creating it, right? This is like the C part, select.
No, so this is the R part. So this is actually data that's already in our database. We haven't created anything yet. So this is assuming we have a pre-existing database full of data, which they usually are full of data. So this is how we retrieve the data or read the data.
So select is the read part.
Yes.
Okay, and then insert was the.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But there's a lot to select. There's a lot of different so this is a little bit long, so I'm gonna go a little faster. So this one is just, we want multiple columns from a table. We can comma separate them between the select and the from. Okay, so we say, if I want first name, last name, I would say select first name, comma, last name from users. Or description, comma, price from products. Okay. Questions about this so far? All right, now we have select with conditionals. So this allows us to narrow down and drill down and not take or get specific data that we're looking for. So what does this one do?
Selecting a specific ID number.
Exactly. So I'm getting the column name, whatever it is, first name, last name, price, from the table, right? So it would be select first name from users, where, and then where is the condition. So where just means like where such and such is true. It always is followed by some sort of Boolean condition that indicates what we're looking for. So this says, get me the record in column name 1 from table names with an ID of 2. Okay, so if we're querying our database, if we're checking if a user is in our database, if we want to log them in versus register them, we would query our database and say, do we have this user in our database? And if we don't, then we say we want to route them to our register page because we don't have a record of them. But if they are in our database, if this is a user we've seen before, then we can route them to the login page and have them log in. Okay. Questions so far? All right. Okay, so what does this one do?
Selects from column name 1. It selects the column name ones from the table names, whether it's the ID is 2 or 3. Still.
Yeah. So we can use, just like in Python or JavaScript, we can use conditionals, or I'm sorry, not conditional. What's the word I'm looking for? A logical statement. So if we can say either where ID equals 2 or ID equals 3, and we can use the and. So we can basically grab or update our where conditions to include different things we want, right? So we could say the name, we could say where name equals Robert or Bob, right? So we could basically specify and get more specific as to what we're looking for. All right. What about this one? What does this do?
Selects all where whatever the column name. Actually, no. It starts with any letter but stops at E.
Yes, very good. Very good. So this is saying select everything from whatever the table is, where the column name, where the item that we're looking for, and the like is like, right? I don't know how else to say it. And then the %, this says ends with E, right? So we're looking for everything in our table that ends with the letter E. Okay, so to signify ending, we put the %, and then whatever we want the final condition to be. So we could say ends in ER, right? That would get my name. Ends in IN, it would get, right? Whatever condition we're looking for. And that, so basically it selects everything from table name in the specific column that ends with an E.
So the like again is just the function then.
Yes.
That kind of tells it.
And I don't know if I would use the word function. It's more like a keyword. I would say we specify the keywords and the sort of, it's kind of awkward to me and clunky, but select everything from where like, right? So everything from users, where first name is like, and then the like is just sort of a catch-all for we can put different conditions in like based on the syntax of the language. So this is the specific syntax to find everything that ends with an E. And then the next one, what do you think this one does?
Everything that begins with an M.
Exactly. So select everything from table name, where the column name, which is the specific item we're looking for, is like M something. So it's anything that starts with an M. Okay.
Do you have an example of where you'd actually want to use that? Either.
Yeah, any type of search, like if we have a search bar on our site and we want to allow the user to search for, like, say, posts, we could say, we could put a condition where like select everything from posts where created at is greater than, Tuesday's date, right? So that would give everything that all the posts that were created up to whatever date we specify. So that it's very common to use this.
Okay.
Yeah. For what we're doing though, this is, I don't know if we'll use this specifically in our application. I can't think if we do, because we don't really implement any search, like the ability to search for, we're gonna like look for specific things. All right, and what is this one?
Not
All
equal
names
to?
that start with an M.
Yeah, so this is select everything from the table in the columns that does not start with an M. So this would be huge, right? This would return a lot of stuff. But you never know. We want to exclude everything that's, on a certain date or has a certain Boolean value, right? So this greater than this symbol here basically just means negation or not. And that's the only time I've ever seen that used for not. This is not very common. All right, so we can also sort, right? So we can select items and we can sort our data. So what does this one do?
Selecting everything from table names and you're ordering it by the column's name with a description.
Descending order.
Descending order, right?
Descending
So,
is.
yeah. So this would be, so if it's a string, descending order would be reverse alphabetical. If it's a integer, it would be highest number to lowest number. The opposite of this is ascending, right? So the next one, ascending, ASC. So, and ASC is the default. I think if we just order by column name, I don't think we have to add the ASC. I think it does it by default. But if we want to have it descending, then we have to specify this.
In what way is it descending or ascending? Is it alphabetically or?
Yeah, so if it's a string, it's alphabetical. If it's a number, it would be numerical. So
Okay.
descending order, like if we wanted to sort by ID for some reason, it would take, if we sort descending, the most recently added item would be on top and the oldest item would be on the bottom.
Oh, okay. So for IDs, it's not going to be like even if that ID was like a bunch of random numbers, it won't be like, all right, let's look at the value of this random number, like as it is an integer. Let's look at it as like when it was created.
Yeah, so I mean, if we have random numbers, we wouldn't really sort them in any way. So the descending would be like,
yeah, because the way SQL does it is like here's your ID, like in an order.
and it increments. Yeah.
Increments. Okay.
So if we wanted to find like the post with the most likes, right? If we say select everything from posts order by likes descending. So that would put the post with the most likes on the top of our list.
Gotcha.
Cool. Any other questions about this one, or ascending or descending? Cool. And I messed this one up. Yeah. So offsets and limits. So if we only want like the top 3 of something, we can use the limit. And I don't know why the coloring changed here, but we select everything from table names, and limit 3 just means only return the first 3 items. Okay. And that's it for select. So select, there's kind of a lot to select. I wouldn't like try to memorize these. Not that you would, but if anybody were inclined to try to memorize these, I don't remember them. I have to look them up anytime I try to execute a SQL statement, I have to look it up. So, and again, there's so many tools that write it for us that I would just use, like, make a reference, maybe make a cheat sheet. Okay, so that's select corresponds to read. Insert corresponds to create. So to insert an item, this is the syntax. So basically we're just going to be using the keywords insert into, and that's just the way SQL works. It's just insert into. We say the table name, right? So whatever, if we want to insert into users, then in here we specify what we want to insert. Okay, so if we want to insert first name, last name, we would name the columns inside these parentheses. Okay, so we'd say insert into users, first name, last name. Okay, then after that, there's another keyword, values, and then we would specify what we're inserting. Okay, so if, Tyler Maxwell, right, whatever name we're inserting, would be after the values in these parentheses. And we can insert, once we have established the columns that we're inserting into, we can add multiple values after here. So we could have this, we could add 100 people if we wanted to in one insert statement.
How would I know to go, which one goes to column 1 and which one goes to column 2? If there's like a bunch of
the order. So if we say first name, last name, and then if we mix up this, then it's going to switch it in our table. So this is just saying, okay, basically I'm going to give you a bunch of parentheses with values in it. This is the order I want you to insert them in.
So it would do first name, last name, first name, last name, first name, last name, if there's like a bunch of them. Okay.
Yeah. And here we have to include all of the non-null, except for the ID. We don't have to, the ID will auto increment, but anything that requires a value, we would have to include here. Otherwise it would throw an error.
So as soon as this gets put in, the value gets put in, it gets its own unique ID, you're saying,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Do these words have to be in all caps?
Good question. They do not. They don't have to be, but it's convention to do it just so people can see. It's easier to read what the code is. So SQL will take it, whether it's capital or lowercase, but we're going to write in our Python files. Basically, we're going to set a variable to the SQL statement, and that's it. We're never going to write it again. So we're going to set up a Python function to call this. So people, when they're reading our code, we only have to capitalize it one time. I know it's kind of a pain to capitalize and hit the cap locks and turn it off. So we only have to do the capitals one time. So I advise
It's definitely, of all the conventions, this is the most annoying one, for sure.
Yes, it is. It is. And this is kind of like, goes back to, it's the way they did things when I was an infant. Right? They just made sure that the syntax was just weird. Any other questions about this? Cool. And again, I wouldn't memorize it. Just when you need to insert something, go to the platform, look it up, and just fill it in. I don't think anybody remembers this stuff unless they're a database person. Update. So this is of the CRUD statement, this is the U. So to update an item, we say update. And again, I apologize for the coloring. I don't know why it's not coming out right. Update is a keyword. Table name is whatever table we're updating. And then we put set, and then we list basically the key value items, and then where conditions, we have to specify the condition, the item we're updating. Otherwise, it'll fill our entire column with whatever some value is. So be sure to add the where condition. So it's going to be something like where ID equals 1, right? Or where, if we wanted to change multiple values in our table, we would say where column name equals posts or something like that. If you don't specify where, everybody in our, if I say to update users, column name, first name, column name, last name equals Tyler Maxwell, Tyler Maxwell is going to be the first name and last name for every single user in our table. Okay, so you remember to specify where conditions. Does that make sense?
So we have to have the word condition there.
Yeah, so condition, no, I'm sorry. So conditions is what we're going to specify. And again, I'm using this program and it's messing up my coloring. So we would say something like update users set first name equals Tyler, last name equals Maxwell, where ID equals 1 or ID equals whatever my ID is.
I see.
Okay. And I'm gonna demo the first practice exercise, and you guys can watch me do this, and it'll make more sense once you actually see it in practice. Yeah, so there's the where condition. So be sure to include your where, otherwise it'll do it to the whole table. All right, and finally delete. Delete is protected. So basically the syntax is delete from table name, and then you specify what you want to delete, and then you specify the values that you want to delete. Okay, so if I wanted to delete my first name and last name, I would say first name, last name, and then the values I want to delete. Okay, be very careful with delete, because again, if we don't, and I don't put in a where condition, so there should be a where condition there, and you specify, otherwise it'll delete everything. This is a mess up. So there should be a condition, a where condition in here that specifies which one we want to delete. Okay. Functions, we talked about functions yesterday. Any questions on the CRUD before I go on?
I don't like how the CRUD acronym, the first 2 letters are different.
Yeah, right. It seems like when I was in boot camp, it seemed like everything, like they did stuff intentionally to confuse new people to make you remember more stuff. But yeah. But you don't have to memorize it. It will just become second nature. And you won't even really think of the CRUD acronym. You're just going to be saying, okay, I need to add a user, right? Or I need to change this user. So you don't need to memorize like what CRUD stands for or which ones go with which. Okay, so functions. The function that we used yesterday was the now, and then the on update now. We're not going to use a whole lot of functions. I think that's the only one that we're going to use. But if you wanted to like concatenate strings or do something like that, there's a list of functions on the platform. But again, we don't make much use of the functions. Okay, so we'll talk about joins in the afternoon session. Please read the section if you haven't already, because joins is where it gets kind of tricky. Okay, so read through the section, follow along with the practice exercises, and after in the afternoon we'll talk about left join and joins and left joins. So I want to go to the dashboard. Which one is it? Users. MySQL Workbench. This one is just, I'm not even sure what they want you to do here. So we'll start with the users practice assignment. So I'm just going to build it from scratch. I'll show you guys kind of a trick, a way to do this. There it is. Cool. No, that's not it. Uh-oh, I lost my notes. This isn't good. Okay, this is gonna be fun. Okay, so let's go through this one. So they give us the ERD diagram. So to start out, I'm just gonna make this, right? I'm gonna go to MySQL Workbench. And I'm going to make the diagram that's displayed here, right? So I'm going to make this. Okay, so let me, I'm the Workbench. Where do I start if I'm making an ERD diagram?
You gotta go down one, like the weird little connected screens thing.
Yeah, the weird little model thing. Then I just click the plus sign. And
Gotta click on that.
click on this. So change the schema name to, I think they want us to call it users. I'll just call it users.
Do you know what schema means? Or like what the difference between that and like the database?
Yeah,
is?
schema means different things in different database systems. So schema in anything other than MySQL means like the database design. But for MySQL, the schema and the database are synonymous. They just call a database a schema.
Okay.
Okay, so I rename my schema to users. And then I come up here and I add diagram. Okay, so I want to create a table called users. So I just click on the new table button and I double click this to create my table. So what is our convention for table names? If I want to make a table to hold users, what do I call my table?
Plural users.
Yeah, plural users. And what do we call the primary key?
ID.
ID, right? Always call it ID. It's always an int. These will automatically check the primary key, they're not null. We just have to come over and check the AI auto increment. Okay, what else do they want? First name, last name, email, create and update. Okay. So we need a first name. Oops. And we just use the varchar last name and varchar email. Varchar is fine. I'm not going to make a password this time, but just know if I did make a password, what do I need to change?
255 from varchar.
Right. Add characters to varchar. Otherwise, we're going to run out of room for our hash password. Okay, and then created at is a date time. Oh my gosh.
Where does the password get hashed at?
So we're going to use a program called bcrypt, which will
Okay.
hash the passwords for us. Yeah, it'll hash them and salt them, and I think bcrypt is, I think, pretty much the industry standard. I've never heard of anybody using anything other than bcrypt. Okay, date time. Am I in the right place? Yeah. What function do I add to my created at so it does the timestamp?
Now.
Awesome. And updated at.
Can you say that again? What is now?
Now we'll create the timestamp. So as soon as a instance is created, as soon as we add an item to this table, the now function will execute and it will basically add that to our database. It will basically say what time the user was created.
Okay.
I'm guessing you could make it so it does it like 5 minutes from then or something.
You could, but I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean the created at and updated at is you want these to be accurate because you want to be able to, like, if a post was made 5 minutes ago, that's a common, you'll see that on websites where somebody just posted this 2 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
you want them to be accurate. So date, time, and then how do we, oops. There it goes, went away, cool. So I did update, created at, and then updated at. What's the syntax for that?
Now, parenthesis, on, update, now no parenthesis.
With parentheses,
With
almost
parentheses?
perfect.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is saying when it's first created, updated at and created at will be the same exact value. If it's never updated, if there's not like a functionality to update the item we're storing, then they'll always be the same. But if we have something like a post or a like or whatever that we want the user to be able to update, we want to keep track of when they update it. So basically this says the first now says as soon as it's made, but then SQL knows if it's being updated, and when it's updated, it will reapply the timestamp. It'll restamp it to when the item is updated. Okay. Cool. All right, so I think that's done. So I've got my user. Just gonna give it a quick look, make sure I didn't mess anything up. Looks good. Just gonna compare it to the varchar. Looks fine, yeah. Okay, so now I have my ERD diagram. So again, I know I sound like a broken record, but this can be confusing for some people. This is the map, right? This is just nothing yet. This is just a bunch of pixels on my screen at this point. So in order to make the database, what do I do?
You have to go, is it view? You have to do, it's somewhere up there. What's one of those things, and you have to do like the forward engineer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we want to make a database, right? So we go to database, right? So just know that I want to make a database, go to
Logic's
database.
there.
Yeah. So come up here, click on database, and it's going to be forward engineer. So we're basically going from the plans to the database. We're making what we want to make. So we're moving forward engineering. We click this. Should be able to accept the defaults. Everything here should be fine. Click next. If we are making an update, right? If we've come back to our ERD diagram, basically gone back to the drawing board and said, okay, now I need a new table, right? We can click here and generate drop schema, and it will drop the database that we have right now called users, and we'll basically create a new schema or a new database in its place. Only problem with this is all the data will be gone. Okay, but for our purposes, you're not going to be storing any relevant data. This is just practice, right? So you're just going to have like, you know, John Doe and, you know, Funny McFunny Face, just a bunch of dummy names that don't mean anything. So it's okay to click this button. You're not breaking anything. And I do have a users database, so I want it to go away. So I'm going to click this, click next, type in your password. You can click save password in Vault here, so you don't have to type it every time, but I just leave it so I can demonstrate it for you guys. And click OK. And don't need to check anything here. Just click next. And again, this is the code that was generated by the diagram that I made. So you can see, if you can read it at your leisure if you want to. It says create table if not exists users, and it adds the ID, not null. All this stuff is done basically automatically. Okay, so you can save that if you want. I'm not going to. I'm just going to click next. As long as you see check marks, everything went well, and click on close. So now this ERD diagram is hopefully a database in my databases. So I come back to the home screen, click on the database icon, click here, and I should have a new, so users is here, but I want to make sure that it's not.
Wait, where did you go?
So I start at the home, right? So the first thing I did was make a ERD diagram under models. And then once I forward engineer, I came back to the home screen. So if you ever want to go home, it's this little home icon right here. This is like the main screen.
Yeah.
And then from there, the database, the top icon, it represents my databases that have been forward engineered. Just click on that. This comes up. This is, you can have multiple instances of your database running. I just have it, the one on 3306. Click here, and all the databases that I've ever made are in here.
Oh yeah. Dang, my thing looks way different from yours.
Probably just fewer databases, right?
Uh,
Or are you on a Mac?
No, I'm on a Apple.
on PC? How does it look different? Like what?
I don't know. Maybe yeah, it is just because you've got all those different databases, and I have.
Okay.
I have no.
Cool. Okay, so you'll notice that left right is highlighted. So that was the last database I was working with. So I want to make sure that I'm using the user's database, right? So I can either double click it and it will say, as soon as it's bold, I know that that's the database I'm using. The other alternative would be to actually write a SQL query. So you could say use users. And when we're running SQL queries in here, there's two ways to run it. So there's both of these lightning bolts are ways to actually execute our SQL queries. So if I click this one, it'll run everything in this file. If I only want to run one statement, then I can click here and it'll only run the statement where my cursor is. So if you just want to rerun a single SQL code, you just make sure your cursor is on the one you want to run or highlight the one you want to run and then click that. So that query or that statement just said use the user's database, and you'll notice that the user's database is now in bold. So that indicates which database I'm using. Okay.
How did you make it bold real quick? I'm so sorry. I feel like.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So there's two ways to do it. You could either double click it. So now
Okay.
I'm using the Twitter database. And I just wanted to demonstrate the lightning bolts. You would probably just double click it rather than typing use users, right? I just wanted to show you that this is the other way to do it would be to say, run the actual query statement that will actually you tell it to use the database. So and this is the great thing about SQL Workbench is all these little functionalities, it's actually running SQL statements behind the scenes. So it's doing the SQL for us, which is nice because
Also has like random databases. I don't know why they're here. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, there should be like a world, and you may have the world, and then there's the Sakila.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to say that.
Sakila and Sys.
And Sys. Yeah, so Sys is the database that's for your system. Sakila is like the database, like a sample database they give you that you can basically use to practice on. The world one, sometimes they come with world, sometimes you have to download it, but world is basically just data about all the different countries and languages and life expectancy and all that.
That's cool.
How do you import that if you don't have it?
It's in the platform. I think it's SQL countries is one of the assignments you can get.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to do a few of these because I deleted my notes and I know it's painful to watch me try to do this. Let me see if I have. Oh, there it is. Cool. Awesome.
Is it bad to hit the lightning bolt twice on the same?
Yes, because if you hit it twice, well, this isn't that big of a deal, but if I have like a statement that adds 100 users, then it's going to add the 100 users again.
Got you.
Yeah, so that's why that option is there. So if you don't want to run the statement that deletes a user, adds a user, you can avoid running it.
Okay, just for now, we don't even have anything in there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Okay, so just to show you a little shortcut, I'm going to take all of this. I'm sorry, is there a question?
No, sorry.
Okay. I'm going to copy all this stuff. Actually, I don't need the last ones. Copy all this stuff. And come back over to my workbench, and I'm going to paste it in here. So comments are double dash. So double dash, whoops. And I don't know how to do multiple cursors, so I'm just going to do it with my hand. Sorry about this. There we go. Wasn't too bad. Oh, there's more.
Are you just double dashing them all?
Yeah, I'm just putting double dash in front of them, all of them that way. So this is just the assignment, the stuff they wanted us to do in the assignment. So just so we don't have to keep going back and forth, I can just make the comment and then we can write the query right here. All right, so the first thing they want us to do is create 3 new users. So you guys walk me through this. How do I create 3 new users?
Insert.
Insert, awesome. Insert, what's next?
You want to get the from where it's at, right? The table, or
Yeah,
wanna
but there's
go-
another keyword that goes along with insert.
Into.
Into, right. And we want to insert them
Table?
into, the table we want to insert them into, which is users with that S. Then what do I put?
Table?
then
So
it's
user,
the
users-
little parentheses, right?
yep, parentheses, and I want to specify the columns. I want to add the users, add the 3 users to. So if I come out over here to users, I click the little caret, I can look at the table that exists. So I have user. I can come over here to this little icon, and this will open a new query tab, and it will basically run the SQL for me. So it's selecting everything. And you can say users.users, that just means the users schema and the users table in the user schema. It's a little confusing because I named them the same thing, but this means the table, this means the schema, this means the table. And this will basically run the SQL, and if I had anything in here, they would show up down here.
You could just write it in there then, though, right? Or do you have to write it in like query, or like actually write it in, or could you like fill
No,
it in the first name, last name thing?
Yeah, so I could add it here, but we're going to use the SQL. You can add it using this. There's a way to do it. We have the form editor, but we're going to do it the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
Okay, so insert users into users, and the table names. That's why I did that, so I get the.
I'm sorry, how did you add the users again? Tab?
So the users, if you click on the users schema, click on the little, I don't know what that's called, a caret. It'll show you all the tables, all this. Don't worry about the indices and triggers and all that stuff. The tables, right? Click on the little caret, and then it'll give you the users table. Go over to the right where these little icons are and click on the last one, and that will execute this code. It'll select all the users, and it'll automatically run, basically select everything from users.
Okay.
So if we had anything in there, they would be listed down here.
Got it.
Cool. All right, so let's add some users. Go away, come on. Oh, whatever. Okay, so I say, what goes in the parentheses?
Users.users?
Yeah, so I could say users.users, that would signify the table. Or if there's already a table called users, I could just say just users. So either one of these is fine. But what do we put in the parentheses?
That would be like the first name, last name, or whatever columns you have in the users table.
Exactly. We want to list all the columns we want the data inserted into. So it's first name, last name, and email, right? Okay, so the first set of parentheses signifies the columns. Then we add a second keyword, values, right? That signifies the values we want to enter. Now, these white space doesn't matter, so we can put our values on the next line, and that'll work just fine. And some people do that just so it's easier to read. So now how do I add users?
Another parentheses.
Yeah, and I'm gonna copy and paste from my notes so you guys don't have to watch me type. And it's probably painful to watch. So I'm just, I just pasted in a bunch of users like whoa.
I'm typing with you so I can follow along.
Oh, okay, I'll slow down. I'm sorry. Some people like I know it's like I'm a horrible typist, so watching me type is probably like watching a monkey try to play golf.
Nah.
We gotta get that words per minute.
I know, right? And I was so nervous at first. I'm a little better now, but I was like messing up every time I tried to type something. Yeah, so values are just like, so Tyler's going to correspond with first name, Maxwell's corresponds with last name, and email corresponds with email. And so every user we add, we just separate it with a comma and then new parentheses to indicate, sort of package up the user that we're adding. And added Ed, and then Sean, you guys are gonna meet Sean this afternoon.
If, for say, someone was like registering, but they didn't have an email, you'd still need that spot though, right? Would you just leave that like blank parentheses or something? So
You
like,
could do that, or
would you just do two because it's still in the same quote or parentheses?
I think you can just say null. Don't quote me on that though. I'd have to look it up because I don't remember the syntax. But you could do like an empty string if you wanted to, or if it's not a required, I think we would just have to leave it off because otherwise, yeah. So if you list it here, you have to include it here. Does that make sense?
Yes,
right?
okay. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah.
Wait, so what happens if you're pre-populating data that someone gave you or inputting data someone gave you and you are missing one of those fields?
Are missing a field, then I will have to look it up. I don't want to do it right now. I think you can just say null.
Just have it skip it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, null, it is a keyword. So null, as long as when we specify, when we create our table, we don't indicate that it has to be not null. It's like when we did the ID, remember it was said primary key and then NN. As long as you don't check that box, it's okay if it's null.
You'd have to manually do that for any missing
Yeah.
fields. It wouldn't just know, but there's a blank space here. Let's call it null.
Right, right. And if you're importing data, generally you're going to prepare the data before you import it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go back. Okay, cool. So it's getting kind of long. So I'm just going to do this one and the next one. So if I want to run just this command, what do I do?
Highlight it.
Yeah. Highlight it. Come up to the lightning bolt with the little cursor looking thing. So if I can check to make sure if I have errors, I just look down here. As long as it's a green check mark, green means good, everything went okay. So if I highlight it, run it, I get a green check mark, everything looks good. I can come back now to my users and I can run this and you'll see that now my users are in my table.
All right, real quick, what was the lightning bolt? Why'd you hit the second one from the left?
So this one runs all the code. This
In
one
the
just
table?
runs, yeah. So if I had a bunch of, like if I go on to my next one, right? So now it's one, I want to retrieve all the users. So it's going to be, this one's pretty easy. So I'll just say select everything from users, right? If I hit this button, it's going to add duplicate data to my table. It's going to run all of these, right? So I'm going to have a duplicate. I'm going to be in there twice. Ed's going to be in there twice. Sean's going to be in there twice. Which if I don't want that, then I just highlight this, click this button, and it displays my data. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So if I run, and I'll just do it because it's not the end of the world. If I run this one, now I've got duplicated data.
And
Okay.
some different numbers.
Yeah. So it allows you to pick and choose. That way you don't, you can only have to run the queries you want to run.
Can you undo like a last?
Yeah, it's hard to undo. It's
There's no like edit, undo.
yeah, and I'm not the best at this. So that there's, I think it's drop. I don't want to give you guys the wrong command, but yeah, once you do it, it's kind of challenging to get it off. What I always do is I just go back and re-engineer the table because I don't know all the commands. But yeah, I mean, again, it's not the end of the world if it's in there. I will look up during the break. I'll look up a better way to do it because I know there's a command. I just don't know what it is. Any other question? I don't want to go too much longer, so I'm gonna end the morning session here. So practice. Let's see.
How did you turn your background white?
I think it just came that way.
Yeah, mine's just
Yeah,
white.
that's how my default
Mine's
is.
white too.
I think it's under
I mean,
preferences.
Mine black and it's confusing me. It's like
Yeah.
I can't see what you're doing.
Check. Oh God, I'll find it. Appearance. Yeah, this isn't the most user-friendly thing in the world. Well, Caesar, let's get together during the break and we'll try to figure it out for you.
Okay.
All right.
Are we
I'm
gonna
stop-
finish users when we get back or?
Yeah, I can do it this afternoon.
Okay,
I don't want to, I don't want the session to go too long.
I guess